In the heat-hung streets of Harlem, where brick and billboard hold the memories of survival and small victories, there are two kinds of strength that have long kept people alive. The quiet, unglamorous grit of the guardian, who stands between the neighborhood and its predators, and the silent, iron certainty of the soul that will not bend. Carl Lucas, Luke Cage, learned his strength in back rooms and on front porches, in the honest geometry of fists and the hard arithmetic of responsibility. He is a man whose skin refuses to split so that others may breathe easier, and whose temper is tethered to a moral ledger that counts every life in his block as precious. Pyotr Rasputin, Colossus, earned his by choice and under the weight of a different horizon, the Russian countryside's grey wind, the claustrophobic discipline of the X-Men, the burden of a body that can become an implacable column of living metal. Where Luke fights for the immediate and the intimate, Pyotr has been forged into a soldier who must balance the cosmic consequences of victory and loss. The story that brings them to the same ring is not one of petty misunderstanding or manufactured spectacle, but a fracture in principle, a subterranean war over what it means to protect people, to choose whom to save when the city itself groans under the weight of catastrophe. A corporation's experimental reactor stumbles near East River, and its failing core threatens to collapse with a wave of kinetic force that could level a dozen blocks. The corporation hires mercenaries bent on containment and secrecy. Criminal crews seek salvage and advantage. Cage hears the alarm as a neighbor's baby monitor wails and moves with the immediacy of someone who has been made responsible by the simple fact of proximity. Rasputin arrives because the X-Men were called to prevent a larger calamity. The reactor's meltdown risks a chain reaction that could imperil an entire borough and attract attention from those who must never know its anomalies. Their missions overlap and their rhythms clash. The philosophical fault line between them is older than either man's metal. Luke's justifications are proximate and personal. The moral weight of the one, the face of the child in the next building. He follows a strain of ethics that values the sanctity of individual lives above abstractions. His calculus is immediate harm reduction. Piotr's argument is a teleological one, shaped by the experience of choices that echo beyond a single heartbeat, sacrifice for the many, the cold ledger of strategic necessity. He has seen the outcomes of failing to prioritize the larger good. He bears that memory like armor and sometimes like guilt. In quiet moments before confrontation, each man rehearses the other's possible claim. Luke imagines Piotr's steel as a necessary tool, but fears its unyielding logic will sacrifice the vulnerable for the abstract tally. Pyotr, who reads Luke's defiance as admirable, worries that it is nevertheless an indulgence that, left unchecked, risks the collapse of far more lives. Neither view is villainous, both are patriotisms of different scales. As they circle one another at the reactor's perimeter, the air tastes of ozone and old smoke, and each understands that this is less about proving physical dominance and more about testing whether conviction can survive when confronted with unavoidable trade-offs. Their dialogue, when it comes, is not the sloganeering of comic books, but an argument in which fists punctuate claims. Luke insists that the city's people are not collateral and will not be numbered for the convenience of utilitarian calculation. Pyotr counters that sometimes the mercy of one is the death of many, and a man who can bear the burden must do so with resolve. The scene is set not merely as a fight, but as a crucible for what protection asks of those who can afford to give it. They both know they cannot both be right in all particulars. They both know the cost of being wrong. The reactor's core throbs like a heart with a fever, marking the urgency. When the first blow comes, it will be a translation of theory into consequence, and the winner will be decided not only by how hard a man can hit, but by whose moral calculus can be enforced when the dust settles. They meet in a ring of cracked pavement and scattered rebar between sagging scaffolding and the tilted shadows of a city that refuses to stop living. Cage moves first, a human storm whose strikes are the language of survival. He uses space with the instincts of someone who has lived among close, dangerous geometry, doorways, stoops, narrow alleys. His fists land like verdicts against Pyotr's shoulder, like attempts to test an edge. Colossus absorbs the hits with the indifferent grace of living metal. The impact rings through the air, but the steel yields no fracture. Luke's blows are clever, aimed at leverage, at the rare soft seams around joints and the possibility of toppling momentum. He knows the legends of Pyotr's strength, but also the human heart beneath the armor. If you can hurt a man, you can make him hesitate. For a time, the smaller truths matter. A swing to the ribs, a grapple that strains against the arc of Colossus's limbs. Luke wins inches and moral smallness because he advances what he came to do: buy time. But when Piotr sets his feet and answers in kind, the world tilts. A single counterpunch from Colossus carries the weight of a freight train. It is not merely force, but an affirmation of calculus. When necessary, the many are protected by severity. Luke's unbreakable skin takes the blow and the neighborhood around them flinches. Windows rattle, a news van shutters. Luke staggers but does not crumble. He is tenacious to the degree of legend. He tests Piotr's limits with a barrage of hooks and improvised traps. He channels the fury of a guardian who will not let his people be reduced to statistics. Piotr, however, is not only raw power, he is a strategist raised by battlefield constraints. He angles, he drives, he uses his mass to alter the geometry of engagement. He understands that overwhelming force is sometimes an ethical tool, swift, decisive, and paradoxically merciful when it prevents a slower, crueler destruction. The crucial moment comes when both men perceive that the reactor's containment field has failed, and a cascade of superheated energy will sweep outward in less than a minute. Luke has a choice: keep the fight, press his moral protest, or abandon the duel and save those he can reach now. Piotr has the other: stop the chain by pushing the failing core into a place where it will not propagate or focus the blast so that fewer people are harmed. Cage moves with the speed of a man who is intimate with the city's arteries. He runs across rooftops, tears through a storefront to pull a trapped family free, drags a child from a burst window. Each rescue is an argument in motion. Lives preserved are arguments won. Yet with every second he spends saving individuals, the radius of the impending disaster grows. Piotr calculates, if he can change the vector of the core with sheer force, he can spare hundreds. He throws himself, metal and intent, against the failing dam of the reactor. The collision is cataclysmic. The scaffolding collapses in a tide of sparks and steel. Luke arrives mid-shift, slamming into Piotr with the desperation of a man who cannot accept a single unnecessary death. Their exchange atop the reactor is a blur of flesh against steel, of moral urgency against strategic necessity. Luke lands a blow that opens a bruise in Piotr's human flank. Piotr answers with a crushing embrace that might have broken a lesser man. In that clinch, they both speak without words. Luke's hands on Piotr's shoulders plead for immediate human mercy. Piotr's arms lock to redirect catastrophe and accept that some hurt is inevitable to save more. The machine groans toward a rupture. Piotr, with the weight of metal and the steadiness of conviction, chooses the harder arithmetic. He turns his body into a lever and reshapes the blast with a forceful sacrificial motion, channeling the energy away from dense residential blocks and into the river where it will dissipate. The price is physical, a near shattering for his armored form, and it requires him to be utterly unyielding in a way Luke's ethic cannot demand of him without violating the lives Luke has already saved. The beam slams down into the water, vapor and light hissing like a wound closing. When the dust clears, windows blown inward and soot on the faces of the saved, Piotr collapses to his knees, his organic steel dented and smoking. Luke, bloodied and hollow-eyed, stands above him and understands what has occurred in a flash of grief and clarity. The calculus has been applied in the theater of consequence. Piotr did what his philosophy required. He traded his body to save a far greater number, enforcing a moral choice that the situation demanded. Luke's victories, real and necessary, cannot undo that arithmetic. He had saved individuals. Piotr had preserved a greater community by accepting the role of the unbending instrument. The conclusion is not that Luke was wrong to save his neighbors, nor that Piotr lacks compassion. It is that when moral frameworks collide under absolute scarcity, a man who can carry unbearable weight sometimes must bear it, so that others may remain uncrushed. In the stuttering aftermath, Cage helps Piotr to his feet. He touches Piotr's scorched cheek, and for a beat the two men, different types of hero, acknowledge each other's dignity. The crowd, when it gathers, does not shout triumph but relief. They know which lives were saved and sense the cost that saved them. Piotr Rasputin, Colossus, is the victor of the clash because he enforced the decision that preserved the greatest number at the cost of his own frame. Luke Cage's moral courage tempered the means and reduced the tally of the harmed, and in that sense he was victorious in the smaller arenas of the fight. But the final judgment, who kept the city from annihilation, rests with Piotr. The philosophical debate resolves not into condemnation but into a somber recognition. Some victories are won by saving the one before you, some by accepting what it takes to save the many. In this crucible, Colossus, with superior mass, durability, and the willingness to make the immutable choice, proves the necessary victor.